Amen. I want you to understand that this particular story takes place off the Sea of Galilee. Takes place off the Sea of Galilee, and just before this time, they had just fed 5,000 with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. Before Jesus sends them to the other side, he works a miracle that is so impactful to the people that are around. The text before says that they fed 5,000 with a little boy's lunch that consisted of 2 fish and 5 barley loaves of bread. I know the disciples wondered what it was that Jesus was going to do when he told them to tell the people to sit down, we're going to serve lunch, and they looked around and didn't have anything to serve. Imagine Sister Crane, what would you do if Pastor stood up here and told everybody we're going to eat today and y'all haven't prepared nobody's food? And all we have is 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. I know the disciples looked at each other crazy when Jesus said, start bringing the baskets and bring me the lunch. And he starts to break the bread and he starts to fill a basket and move it to the side. Give me another basket. Fills that basket, moves it to the side. Bring me another basket. Fills that basket, moves it to the side. Bring me another basket. And he continues to do it until everybody has enough food to eat. 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And so at this point, Jesus says, okay, everybody's been sustained. Now, I need you guys, everybody, it's time to leave. The meeting is over. Church is over. You don't have to go home. And so what happens is he tells the disciples, I'm going to come with you later on. Y'all go on over to the other side. And I bet even the disciples even asked themselves a question, how is Jesus going to get to the other side? Because we travel together. He ain't got no money, so how is he going to get to the other side? We know he's Jesus, but we going to go on. He tells us to go on over to the other side and meet us. They didn't question Jesus. They didn't say anything. Yes, Lord. They jumped in the boat, headed their way. Jesus climbed the mountain to go pray. Jesus is praying all night long, and the disciples are going along their way and find themselves in the middle of a windstorm. A storm in the middle of the Galilee, of the Sea of Galilee, and you have to understand that it was a lot of wind, and wind is what produces waves when you're in water. It's the power and the force and the velocity of the wind that goes across the top of the water that causes the water to climb and build into waves. And so you have to understand that it was a fierce wind that they were in the middle of. And so it was causing waves very large to be built up. And so the text says that they were fighting these waves. They were fighting this wind. But the text never says that they're afraid. I ask myself, why doesn't the text say that they're afraid? Look at the text. The text just says that they're fighting the waves, but it does not say that they're scared or that they're afraid. You know why they weren't scared or afraid? Because this wasn't the first storm that they had been in. This was actually the second storm that they were in. This storm was a little different than the first storm, because the first storm, Jesus was on the boat. The first storm was actually a true wind and rain storm. The first storm was a storm that they were afraid because they had never been in a situation like this before. And it says that they were trying to get the water out of the boat so that the boat wouldn't sink. Jesus was asleep in the boat, and what they started doing was trying to wake up Jesus to help them get water out of the boat, not realizing that Jesus was the one who needed to be in the boat, because the moment he stood up, looked around and saw what was going on, he says, what? Peace, be still. And then he turns and starts to talk to them. Disciples say, they say, what manner of man is this that even the winds and the waves obey? What manner of man is this? And so this time you have to understand that this storm was not as contrary as the other storm, because it was not a rain and windstorm. It was simply a windstorm, and they were in waves, and they fought waves before. But the thing that scares them is the fact that they see a ghost, what looks like a ghost, walking to them on the water. That's what made them afraid. The text doesn't say anything about fear until Jesus comes walking on the water. Now here comes Jesus walking on the water. He's actually walking on a storm. I'm trying to picture this because there are waves going on. The wind is going on, and Jesus is walking, not running. He's walking on the water to them in a storm. Jesus is walking to them on the water in a storm. They say, it's a ghost. And Jesus says, calm yourself. It is me. Now, Peter, I want you to understand, there's 12 men in this boat. Peter jumps up and says, if it's you, call me to come onto the water. Now I want to pause on Peter for a minute. Y'all mind if I park at Peter for a second? Because Peter is one of the most profound Bible characters that I like to look at. Because here is Peter saying, I want to step out and I want to walk to Jesus. See, you understand, Peter wasn't always named Peter. Y'all know that. Peter's name used to be Simon. And because Peter's name was Simon, it was the day, you remember off the coast of Caesarea Philippi, where Jesus was there with the disciples, and he asked the disciples a question, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? And they started going down, well, some say you're John the Baptist, some say that you're Elijah, some say that you're one of the other prophets. And then he said, okay, well, who do you say that I am? And Simon is the one who speaks up and says, well, you are the Christ, you're the Son of the living God. Jesus then says to him, flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father which is in heaven. And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And now your name is Peter. He changes his name to Peter. And after he changes his name to Peter, there comes a point in his life where Jesus turns around and calls him Simon again. Because Simon was the person before he said that Jesus was the Son of the living God. Follow me. So he changes his name to Peter. And one day they're sitting at the Last Supper. They're sitting around the table, and Jesus turns and begins to speak to Peter, and he begins to say, Simon. He says, Simon, Simon, Satan desires to have you. He wants to sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you. And so I asked myself the question, why in the world would he call him Simon after he already changed his name to Peter? Well, at that point, Jesus needed to talk to the other part that was inside of Peter. He needed to talk to the side that used to be Simon. See, sometimes you have to understand that there are different parts that are inside of you that are always at war. You know those times when you say, I don't want to do this, but then you begin to try and not do it? The side, you have a side that says God is able, and the other side that says, I don't know. The side in you that says, I know that this is going to work out, and the other side of you says, I don't think it's going to happen. And so at this point, Jesus needed to talk to the Simon that was in Peter. He didn't need to talk to Peter because Peter was the one who proclaimed that he was the Son of the living God. I need to talk to the Simon that's inside of you. And I need to tell Simon this message. Satan wants you. And he'll overpower you if you don't let Peter take controls. He'll beat you if you don't let Peter take control. See, we wrestle day in and day out with ourselves. I want to give the devil a whole bunch of credit on that one. We wrestle with ourselves because we know what looks like is going to happen, and we know what God's capability is. But sometimes we begin to settle on the things that we see rather than the things that we spiritually know is possible. And so it becomes a tug of war in your spirit, in your mind, in your heart, that God is able to do something. Because what happens to us is we begin to look back at the things we prayed for that did not work out. But instead of looking at it as the fact that God just wasn't able to work it out, you have to look at it as the fact that that just wasn't the will for your life. And so, we're at a point where Peter says to Jesus, if it's you, call me to step out on the water. When he said, if it's you, Simon began to come out in Peter. Because Peter was the one who said, let me step out. Simon is the one who said, if it's you. There are 12 people in the boat. In the middle of a storm, and one man asked to step out. Lord, if it's you, let me walk on the water. Because see, Peter recognized that he's been walking with Jesus all this time. And if Jesus can walk on the water, and I've been walking with Jesus, I should be able to walk on water too, with Jesus. See, by this time, they should already be at a point in their lives that they know the true power of Jesus Christ. This is actually the 21st miracle that he performed. While he's been with them, they have seen 20 other miracles before this one. 20 other miracles before this one. How many times does God have to move mountains for you before you can believe him on the next side? How many times he got to heal you for you to believe that he's able to heal you now? How many times does he have to take care of you and you're still wondering if he's going to be able to take care of you now? So only one has enough faith to step out on the water. Jesus says you can come. The text says that he walked to Jesus, meaning that he took more than one step. The text says he walked to Jesus. And that's the point where he had a problem. First lesson, God will give you endurance before he gives you breakthrough. He's going to teach you how to endure some things before he can give you breakthrough. The reason he has to do that is because if God started giving you things right away every time, you wouldn't know how to trust him for the things that are down the line. So God's got to give you endurance. We talked about this on Wednesday night prayer meeting. God's got to give you some endurance. He's got to give you some endurance. Because before Jesus comes walking to them on the water, it says that he got to them at 4 o'clock in the morning. We know that in the Judaic calendar, or in the Judaic chronology, there are 4 watches. You have 6 to 9, 9 to 12, 12 to 3, and 3 to 6. He doesn't come to them until the 4th watch, meaning that they've been in the storm for at least 9 hours before he gets there. And they know that the storm is going to end, but they don't know when it's going to end. And so sometimes God's got to give you enough endurance to be able to stand while you're going through what you're going through. Because you can't break in the middle of your situation. So Jesus comes to them at the 4th watch. Peter steps out on the water after Jesus says he can come. He starts to sink. And the reason why he's sinking is because he's allowing what's around him to change his mind about who he's walking to. I think I said something. He's allowing what's going on around him to whisper into his ear and to change his mind about the ability to walk on water even though he's walking to Jesus. In other words, the situation begins to speak to him, and he stops seeing Jesus because he sees his situation. It's a bad situation when your situation starts to speak louder than the God that you serve. And the only way that it can speak louder than the God that you serve is when you start listening to it. Have y'all ever tuned somebody out? I know y'all tune out your kids sometimes. Y'all be sitting there just talking and you know this and that. Oh yeah. And then they might say, so Dad, what you think about that? And I'm like, that's great. Oh, you mean I can blow something up? What I mean is sometimes you got to learn how to tune things out and keep your mind focused. See, what happens to Peter is while he's walking to Jesus, he starts to hear the voice of his surroundings. And the problem is that he's not deciphering between the voice of his surroundings and the voice of his God that's in front of him. And what happens to us so many times is that we believe God, but then the voice of our surroundings begins to talk to us. And we start to sink in what we were walking on because now we hear the voice of the stuff that's messing with us. See, we have to tune ourselves. We have to learn how to be like what Apple has done with the iPhone. When Apple came out with the security features for the iPhone, they came out with something called Siri. And if any of you have an iPhone, you recall doing this when you got your iPhone. When you got your iPhone and you started to set it up, it started to ask you questions while you were setting it up. And when you came to the Siri setup, Siri, they asked you to say some things into the phone. The first thing it says, it say, "Hi, Siri." And then it'll tell you to do it again. And then it'll tell you to do it a third time. And then you'll get a message that says, "Setup complete." And one day, after I got my first iPhone, My wife was playing with it, and I showed her how I could say, hey, Siri, and Siri would answer. Let me make sure stuff don't start going off up here. And I told her, I said, you say it. And she took the phone, and she kept on saying it. And I said, just turn it my way. And I said, hey, Siri. Yes. I said, now you try it again. And she tried again and tried again, and nothing happened. I said, now let me try it again. I said, hey, Siri. And Siri said, yes. See, the thing is that Siri has the ability, the capability of programming your particular voice. Your Siri knows the voice of its owner. And so whenever you say, hey, Siri, Siri is only going to answer the one who has taken their time to program Siri to know their voice. See, if you haven't programmed yourself to hear the voice, if you haven't programmed yourself to hear the voice of the Lord, the voice of the stuff that's all around you will start to speak to you, and you won't be able to recognize the voice of your situation between the voice of God. He begins to hear the voice of the situation. But the moment he starts to sink, he begins to remember that I know that Jesus is able. And so when he starts to sink, he begins to yell, Master, save me. The text says Jesus reaches down his hand and pulls him back up, and they begin to walk back toward the boat and climb into the boat. Now, this is what I like about this story, is that Jesus allows Peter to step out on faith, and when Peter gets scared of the stuff going on around him, he starts to sink. But the moment he calls Jesus' name, he grabs him and allows him to walk on the water again. How do I know he walked on the water a second time? The text says that they climbed back in the boat. It doesn't say that he pulled himself up into the boat. It says he climbed back into the boat, meaning that there was something he was standing on this side in order to support him to get on that side of the boat. So this means that he was walking on water again after he failed the first time. See, God will save you in the middle of your step. When you begin to sink, he'll still reach down and give you another chance to walk on the water again. Next lesson. He will allow you to walk on top of what you're sinking in. He will allow you to walk on top of what you're sinking in. They were in a situation where they could have sank. But when Jesus shows up, he lets them know that they can walk on top of what they're sinking in. See, some of you need to understand that you can walk on top of your situation without it taking you over. Because what happens is what's about to go over your head is now under your feet. What's about to be over your head is now under your feet. And you're walking on what you thought was about to kill you. See, when the devil realizes that you realize that God has enough power for you to walk on your situation, he'll have to find something else to mess with you about. Because you say, devil, I don't care what you bring my way, I'm going to walk on top of it. So he's walking on what he's sinking in. Last thing is sometimes your storm is there to bless somebody else. What I like about this story, lastly, is that there are 12 disciples, but only one steps out on faith. 12 disciples, but only one steps out on faith. The text says that when Jesus and Peter got back to the boat and stepped into the boat, that the storm stopped. And the text says that the other 11 saw everything that happened. And the text says that they began to worship God because of what they saw. Now, Peter is the one who experienced the walking on the water. It was the other 11 who were watching what happened. And the moment that he gets back to the boat, the other 11 begin to realize that Peter is just like I am. Peter is the same as me. And if Peter can walk on the water, I know I can walk on the water too. And the fact that Jesus is able to give us that ability, I know without a shadow of a doubt that you are the Son of the living God. Their confirmation came through the storm that they were in. Sometimes God has to do us like that. People see everything that you're going through, and you say, you're the one going through all the hell and the high water, and people are sitting back watching, but their blessings are coming from what you've been through. Somebody joins church because of what you went through. Somebody takes their stand because of what you've been through. Just because of what you've been through, He'll allow you to walk on your storm. I can see it now. The disciples go into a worship session because some reason the other 20 miracles before that didn't have the same movement in their spirit that this one did. So I asked the question, how many times does he have to move the mountain? How many times does he have to make it work out for us to see the true power? And so as they have their time, they go back to where they came from. And they step out of that boat with another mindset for serving Jesus. There's a story told of this lady who was in church. She went to church faithfully. And one day she was sitting in church and they were in a worship. And she yells out, "Lord, thank you for my new car." And when church was over, She walked out the door, went down the steps, and stood on the corner and waited on the bus. Got on the bus and went on home. The next week she comes back and service got high and she yells out, "Lord, thank you for my new car." When church ended, she got her stuff together, walked out the door, went down the steps and stood on the corner and got on the bus. The next week came and same thing happened. Spirit got high and she says, "Lord, thank you for my new car." Church had went on a little bit longer that time. So she got her stuff together and she walked out the door, went down the steps, and she went to the corner and she realized the bus that she usually catches had already gone. So she went back and she sat on the steps of the church, waiting on time for the next bus to come. Meanwhile, the pastor of the church came out and saw her sitting there, and he began to ask the lady a question. He said, "Ma'am, I know you've been praising God for your new car. And I'm just wondering where your new car is at. Are your kids borrowing that new car that you say you got?" Said, "No, the kids don't have my new car." "Well, did you park it somewhere else and you're trying to save some gas?" She said, "No, I haven't parked it somewhere else trying to save some gas." Then he said, "Well, did you loan it to an auntie or an uncle?" She said, "No, I didn't loan it to an auntie nor an uncle." He said, "Then where is the car?" She said, "I want you to know that I don't have it yet." And he looked at her with a puzzle on his face. She said, "What you need to understand is that when I got here, I prayed for a job. And I asked God to give me a job. And it took a little while. And I got a job." She said, "Then I asked him for a husband." She said, "It took a little while. And then she got a husband." Then she said, "I asked him for some kids." She said, "It took him a little while. And then she finally had 2 kids." And she said, "The difference with right now is that I didn't thank him for my job until I walked in the door on the first day." She said, "I didn't thank him for the husband until I was walking down the aisle. I didn't thank him for my children until I was holding them, rocking them in my arms. But this time, I'm going to thank him in advance because I know that he's able to do it." See how the disciples looked back on the other 20 miracles that Jesus had already done, the other mountains that he had already moved, the folk that he already raised from the dead, from the blinded eyes that he had already opened, the withered hands that he had already fixed, the feeble that he had already touched. I want you to know that if you learn how to praise him in advance, because when you thank him for what you already asked him for, that's just confirmation that you believe that he's able to do what you've asked him to do. He's able to give you whatever it is you need. He's able to pick you up when you need to get picked up. He's able. He's able.